Hi, this is State Senator Jill P. Carter, and you are listening to the Conduit Street Podcast, the best source of news and notes on Maryland politics and policy. The Conduit Street Podcast, the official podcast of Maryland Association of Counties.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. Kevin Kinnally here with Michael Sanderson. Michael, how's it going on your end?
Okay here. Hot day in Maryland. We're feeling like that summer weather is upon us, so must be getting close to a Mako Summer Conference.
That's right. It is coming up. We have a great episode on tap today. We're very excited to have with us Pamela Wood. We'll talk state and local policy and politics. We'll get into what's going on with the primary election and some other odds and ends. Pam Wood covers Maryland politics and government for the Baltimore Banner, which we will get into. Before that, Pamela was at Baltimore Sun for nearly 9 years, covering state politics, including the General Assembly, governor, and state agencies from the Sun's State House Bureau in Annapolis. Also, on the Baltimore and Anne Arundel beat, local government is where the action is, so we definitely want to talk about that as well. And of course, Pam was the longtime environment reporter at the Capital Gazette. Pamela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, let's start with the big news recently. The Baltimore Banner, it's sort of the new kid in town, and made a big splash around those of us who follow state and local policy and politics. Lots of familiar faces, you included, noteworthy among them, have joined the Baltimore Banner. So we're really interested. How does it feel? What's the setup over there? What's the vibe with the Baltimore Banner, and what's the mission all about?
Well, I'll tell you, the vibe at the Baltimore Banner is really great and really exciting. For those who haven't heard of us, we're a new nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization based in Baltimore. And we are, aiming to bring another voice, another option for news in the Baltimore region and maybe one day statewide if we do well. And we're trying a new model, which is a nonprofit, but at a large scale, compared to, say, my friends over at Maryland Matters, who I'm sure Conduit Street listeners, I'm sure follow their work as well. They're kind of small and focused on state politics. We're much larger, and we aim to soon be your kind of all-purpose news source. So politics, yes, that I do, local government, police, crime, courts. We plan to expand into business reporting, health reporting, the suburbs, sports coming online. So we kind of want to be a full-scale operation, but we're nonprofit.
Right. And the focus is all local, right? You're not trying to cover the stories from Croatia or whatever. This is all Baltimore and Maryland flavored, right?
Yes, absolutely. We actually don't even belong to, one of the international wire services. We're not going to run world news unless there is a local tie, for example, the January 6th hearings, some of it has a local flavor with, what Congressman Raskin is doing or what Congressman Harris did or didn't do. We'd be interested in that part, but not the national news. We are here locally to give you the information that people need really on their day-to-day basis. Local and state government affects your life so much, and that's what we're focused on.
Well, I will just say greedily, as a consumer of all this news coverage at every level, I just want more. I love better, but I also love more. So more players and more contributors to the conversation around, jealously, public policy at the state level, at the local level. I find it interesting. The more eyes and ears and typists and writers and so forth on it, I think it's better for the community. So I'm thrilled to hear of this getting launched. I'm excited for your role with it. And for those of us who follow, Baltimore issues and for Maryland issues, I think this is a good turn.
Yeah, thank you. And we're excited. We want to be both more and better, and we want to offer some depth and context and perspective into our coverage, and be really thoughtful and intentional about producing coverage that helps people be informed and empowered as they make decisions in their life. And, we maybe might take a little bit different angle than my friends at the other publications and other news outlets in town. And we think that's better for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And it's refreshing to hear, talking about just covering local and state stuff. I mean, we know we've all heard the horror stories of a bunch of rich people buy up the local paper and the local reporter loses their job. And then all of a sudden there's nobody to be at the city council meeting, right? So, and Pam, the other thing I'll say, a lot of people are used to newspapers making endorsements, particularly we are in primary season. That's not going to happen at the Banner. And that's because it is a nonprofit. Is that right?
That's right. And honestly, as a politics reporter, it's the greatest relief because it's confusing. A lot of times readers don't understand that the opinion page folks who do the endorsements are separate from the news reporters. That can be confusing to people. They think that the reporters are involved. And then you also just get the candidates asking all the time, when's the endorsement coming? When's the endorsement coming? I don't know, it's not my department, but because we are a nonprofit, we can't engage in political activity that way because of our status. And so we are giving our readers and our community a ton of information about these primary candidates. We have a voter's guide. We've been writing stories about the candidates and issues coming up, lots of information, but nobody at the Baltimore Banner will suggest who you should vote for. That's your decision. And we want to give you some tools so you can make that decision yourself.
I'd imagine that is a relief, especially when you have to deal with some of the folks who maybe didn't get an endorsement, right? And failing to recognize that it wasn't you who penned the endorsement. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Of course, the Banner does have a robust social media presence already. And the reality is that a lot of people are relying on social media for their news. I mean, it is what it is. And not necessarily from a reputable source like the Banner. Social media has changed the game, right? Now, everyone is a journalist. So you're dealing with that, right? You're dealing with misinformation, fake news, all of that. But it also means that you and your colleagues can have conversations with your audience in real time. In your mind, is that a good thing or does it lead to bad things?
It's mostly a good thing. I mean, I think democratization of information is great. You no longer have to buy ink by the barrel in order to have your say. As the old saying goes, anybody can start a Twitter account or start a web page and just fundamentally for free speech. That's great. There is a challenge when people are purposefully misinforming others or just misunderstand things. But it is good to get feedback. I use Twitter a lot, also Instagram, Facebook, and I can connect with readers. People give me tips. They respond and give feedback on stories. And most of the time it's productive. There are some nasty trolls out there, but that's the case for everybody, right? Dealing on the internet. So I find it's mostly valuable as long as you don't let it become too much of a distraction.
In my opinion, you navigate it really well. I mean, it leads me to just while we've got you, I'm really interested. What do you think are the ingredients of doing this kind of work? I mean, just being a journalist and covering public policy generally. I mean, I think folks on the outside would think, well, you have to be a good writer. But I feel like the mission is a lot broader than that, isn't it? It's not just writing. It's having a nose for where the story is and how much of this, what pieces go out to people and really will catch on, right? Isn't that a bigger part of this than just being the typist?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Writing ability is just one component. And honestly, it's actually one of my weaknesses. I'm not the strongest writer. I'm perfectly competent, I think. I work with some people who are just amazing and beautiful writers, but especially covering policy and politics and governance. It's a lot about knowing what's going on, knowing what's going to happen before it happens, being prepared for it. So being connected with staffers, lobbyists, elected officials, knowing what's going on, paying attention, connecting the dots, being able to distill complex topics. You both know, in Annapolis, one day you have to become an expert on elements of the budget and what fencing off money means. And then the next day you're talking about brain development as it relates to what the smoking age should be. And then the next day it's, which medical providers should be licensed to give abortion care. I mean, you swing from one to the other, so you have to be able to synthesize a lot of complex things and learn very quickly. And then for me, the writing part's just sort of the part at the end, like, okay, let me take all this information and get it out in a clear way. So yeah, just being someone who's good at writing or wants to write is not the only qualification to be a journalist.
One of the most difficult aspects, I think, is taking, especially when you're dealing with a lot of technical writing, like if you read a fiscal note or you're trying to do something in the budget, and like you said, in a way that people can understand, that is a lot harder than people realize sometimes, especially when you do have complex topics, when you're trying to nail something down and narrow it in a way that is succinct and that your readers can understand, especially in government. Being able to get through that and put it out in a way that readers can understand, I think is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important skills to have in this kind of job.
Yeah, if I put something like BRFA in a story, like I probably get fired. Nobody knows what that means. I have to explain, what that is. And Kevin, you mentioned fiscal notes, which are, the DLS analysts are just the unsung heroes of state government and the General Assembly, because they can distill everything down into clear information. And although still honestly, not working in this world may not understand a lot of what's going on, but, I can read it and then translate it a little further so that, average person can understand what's going on and what's being talked about.
Yeah, I think I might flatter Mako a little bit by saying we feel like we have some of the same responsibility. I mean, you have this big responsibility to the larger readership and followers and the public. We feel like, sort of representing and serving our own constituency and county governments, we're doing some of the same thing. We look at the bill hearing schedule for a week ahead and isolate, hey, that briefing is going to be important because we're the ones doing recycling programs. We need to cover that. And then we may need to tell our members this is what's being discussed in Annapolis. I don't think our journalistic responsibilities are anywhere near the same as primary media, but some of that, I don't know, that mindset I think is kind of similar. I find that interesting.
Yeah, and you have to do the flip side as well. Like you have to take what the counties are saying, here's how things work in our county, and you have to tell the state lawmakers, right, well, here's how your bill would affect us and, screw us up or help us. There's a lot of translation, I think, that goes on in Annapolis from kind of all the parties that are engaged in the political process.
That's really well said. Translation is probably the perfect word for an awful lot of this. Hadn't thought of it that way, but I think that's right. So I can't help but take the opportunity to tout the local beat. So we're talking to you as a big deal reporter in Annapolis and at state and Baltimore City level politics and that sort of stuff. And you do all that stuff awfully well, but you do have a good deal of experience covering at the more local and local government level, which we think is awfully important. That whole, rubber meets the road and the government closest to the people and those various cliches and so forth. But do you have any reflections on time spent in places like Anne Arundel County where it's even more small ball and grocery store level accountability and that kind of stuff? Any reflections on covering policy at that level as well?
Well, I will admit that sometimes I miss my days being a local government reporter. I don't miss, county council meetings that go past midnight in Anne Arundel County or Annapolis City. A few times there were Annapolis City Council hearings that went till like 3 a.m. and that happened multiple times. People talking about city dock zoning and redevelopment. I mean, all bets are off. People are passionate and they can walk to City Hall to make their voices heard. And it was funny, the other day I was up in Towson for a gubernatorial candidates event, and there were a bunch of Baltimore County folks there, former county executives, county council members. And it's like, oh, this is my old home. I spent 4 years there. I spent several years in Anne Arundel. I like the analogy of grocery store level politics because sometimes it really is about grocery stores, actually. Like, what's this? Is this development going to be built? And what are the traffic implications? And if we build these houses, are they going to overcrowd our schools? Or, where should we fund public access to the Bay? That was a big one in Anne Arundel. I kind of miss it because it really matters so much more than people realize. And right now, people might get rightfully concerned about the January 6th hearings, the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe v. Wade, the concealed carry gun case. Those are important issues, but there's important issues at the local level too that most people are just totally asleep on.
I never thought of that double entendre of the grocery store being, the resident and the representative meeting one another, by the broccoli, but also at the same time, like the mechanics of approving and greenlighting a grocery store are a really big deal for the community. I'm going to tuck that away and use it.
And I've definitely run into people in the grocery store. Like when I live in Anne Arundel County, and when I was covering Anne Arundel, I would literally run into people in the grocery store. People involved in politics.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't escape it at the grocery store level, but it must be frustrating for you. And it certainly is for us that so many people just don't engage. And they don't realize that most of the stuff that affects them every day comes from their local government and their state government. So, I mean, and along the same lines, we mentioned earlier, we are losing local reporters, right? And so it becomes even more of a crisis in my mind. If you don't have somebody writing about this stuff and keeping track of what's going on, it's going to be even harder to get people to engage and to understand what's happening at the local and state level. So can you talk about that a little bit and maybe what your experience was covering local politics and county governments and what kind of engagement you saw at the local level?
Yeah, well, I will say diminishing local news coverage actually has financial implications. There's been academic research looking at when you have a news desert, a county or an area without any local news coverage, that the bond ratings go down. And so the cost of debt service goes up. So, which I know Conduit Street listeners know what that means. It costs you more to borrow your money when you don't have the watchdog aspect of the press keeping an eye on what's happening, in the budget and the financial decisions. But as for me covering local government, it's sort of been, fun and wild. I'll never forget we had an Annapolis mayoral election that they counted and counted and counted, and I forget how many votes it was. We were there till like 3 a.m. counting all the absentees, and then came back at 10 a.m. And it was when Mike Pantelides beat Josh Cohen. Yes. I think it was 2013.
Right.
That was a nail biter election. And then in 2018, I got a nail biter election in Baltimore County, the Democratic primary for county executive, Johnny Olszewski Jr. It took, I've been revisiting this. It took 18 days from election day by the time we got through all the canvases and a recount. So the sort of nail biter ones and the late night things are the ones that stick out in your head. As being pretty fun, but it can be a little tedious as well. Going through comprehensive rezoning and parcel this and, CZMP that, it can be a bit much. You have to sit through a lot in order to find out what in there is important or relevant that you want to pluck out and tell your readers about.
And along those lines, moving to the General Assembly, COVID forced a lot of video live streaming, particularly the General Assembly. They're live streaming their floor sessions. They live streamed the voting sessions, online testimony, et cetera. As far as keeping live streaming for floor sessions, great. What's your take on voting sessions, being able to submit online testimony? I feel like a lot of people like the idea that they can go on to the General Assembly site and look at what somebody wrote, right? What their testimony was. That's a new feature. Again, we don't know what's going to stay and what won't, but what's your take there? What do you think is the sweet spot?
Well, I hope it all stays. As a journalist, there's very few things I can give an opinion on or have a position on, but a greater government transparency and public accessibility is absolutely one of the things that as journalists we always advocate for. And we actually do have an arm that does that for us, the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. Rebecca Snyder is our person, our presence in Annapolis. And we always absolutely unequivocally want more access for the press and for the public. So thank goodness, that we finally have come into 2022 with technology and the way our government operates. It took far too long to get live streaming of the floor sessions. We had the committee sessions in Annapolis for a while, but not the voting sessions. And thank goodness they opened up the voting sessions to video. And I know that has been a long slog to get those opened up. And they better not go back because we will fight screaming for having that accessibility. Nothing that's done in government should be done in the dark. And it is difficult for people to get to Annapolis. And there were health concerns. And now that we've seen it, that the government did not fall by having voting sessions live streamed. Maryland didn't collapse. The government did not collapse because of all the live streaming. So hopefully we'll keep it going. One thing I would like to see going forward, you mentioned the public testimony. Previously, as a reporter, I would go to the committee office and pull the bill file.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we would get written, we could make photocopies of what was in the bill file. And now it's electronically submitted, which is great. But unfortunately, those submitted testimonies aren't usually available until the bill comes out of committee and goes to the floor, which is a hindrance because we like to see what the written testimony is. Some people do written testimony only. Some people, I think, kind of hide things in written testimony that they won't say out loud in a public hearing. And we want to see it all, right? And give as much information as possible to our readers. And so one improvement I would like to see is immediate availability of the uploaded written testimony for the public, not just for the press, but for the public.
But I bet you did lose, you lost a cool trick. I bet you knew legislators by their voice, right? You knew everybody's voice eventually. Now they're on video. So that's one thing that's less impressive for us all now, but it is what it is. I agree. Transparency is a good thing.
I think a lot of Conduit Street listeners probably have that talent from when it was just audio stream floor sessions to know who, the senator from the capital city is, or the gentleman from Frederick County, or the vice chair of some subcommittee, and sometimes there's some head scratchers in there, but I got pretty good.
Right.
I think a lot of people have that talent, and now it's got their name up there. Those great folks from MPT put the name up when you're watching, so it's a lot easier now.
That used to be a thing, though. We'd sometimes have the war room assembled, waiting for one bill to come up on the floor, especially in the House. And then there'd be a moment because there would be 6 voices in a row who are all pretty familiar. It's the majority leader, and then the whip for the minority party, and then a committee chair, and then a regular floor leader who brings a lot of bills to the floor, and you get a lot of voices sort of tucked away. And then there would be that moment of wait, who's this? And
right.
Be like, another country heard from. Okay. So
there's 141 of them. That's a lot. And there's like maybe 20 or 30 who are pretty frequent. But then to know some of the others, the ones who only speak a few times a session, that's always a challenge.
So I am intrigued by some of these things. The point of view on behalf of transparency and so forth and public access, I think is obviously a no-brainer for the media and for most of us. I think the case is different for stakeholders like say us at MACO. We show up and testify on bills, and we're familiar with the process, but we're being paid to do this, and we're housed in Annapolis and so forth. I confess I've got a certain sympathy for the resident, the business owner, the citizen who's got a stake in one bill because of a family connection or because of a personal experience or something like that. The people who have, I still have this memory of someone who worked at a flower shop in, I think, Hagerstown, and clearly just stepped into the back of the store to do 90 seconds of online testimony on some bill. And the idea that she was able to give her testimony without taking a day off or closing the store to come down to Annapolis to sit in a room for 4 hours so she could give her 90 seconds, but instead, here's a link, and when your bill's coming up, we're going to let you into the room. I think it'd be hard to get the toothpaste back into the tube at that level of participation. Even if we get past, hopefully we'll get fully past these public health concerns, there's a certain degree of easy access for participants that it would be, to some degree, it would be a shame to lose that if we went back to all in person. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but you have to have seen it, right?
Yeah, I think an interesting question for lawmakers would be whether they felt like they've gotten more or different perspectives and voices. Has it been valuable that because we've had remote testimony, has it broadened the variety of folks that they're hearing from on bills? Because as you mentioned, the case of, a florist shop owner concerned about some business proposal, would they have been able to come and do this in 2019, but in 2022 they can. And, I think there's definite value in both the remote testimony and the in-person testimony, and perhaps they can find a way to kind of, balance the two so that you don't completely lose that opportunity for remote testimony, because it is, again, like a democratizing feature that you don't have to take a day off work or the expense of driving and parking in Annapolis. Not everybody has the ability to do that. Still, not everybody has a high-speed internet connection, but more people have that, certainly. So I think that's going to be interesting to see going forward how much of that is retained, and I would like to see that retained in some form.
Well, the worst was when, you'd see people, I'd feel so bad for them. They show up at 1:00 and they say, well, I'm here for the 1 p.m. bill hearing. And little do they know their bill's 16th on the list. And now they're sitting there for 5-6 hours when they thought they were literally going to get to testify at 1:00 for their 2 minutes, and then they'd get out of there. So and you see the people trickle off right as the day goes on, and you have to think you lose some perspective there. So I think maybe finding the balance there, hopefully they can do that, and that is a good thing. But I agree, it's going to be hard to put that back in the bottle.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
Yeah. So you drifted into starting to get into more stories of late nights with close ballot counts and things along those lines. To me, that's just good content. So I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to hear any other fun stories along those lines. We're closing in on our own primary election, which has its own plot lines and may have them, some play out on Tuesday night or into the week even. Any other things that you might want to reflect on, having covered politics at the state and local level here in Maryland? Anything you want to tell our listeners about that you found fun, or good story to tell around the bar room and that kind of thing?
Oh gosh, I should have been a little more prepared for this. It is great though that even at the state level we have such access to our elected officials. They're not these, far off people on, Capitol Hill that we never see. You get to know them. I remember one time, Steve Shue, who's a former Anne Arundel County executive, former state delegate. One time when I was an environment reporter, I was out with some environmental groups in the Magothy River, and we were learning about oyster reefs. And he's a certified scuba diver, and he went scuba diving to look at the oysters with the environmentalists. Like, how cool is that? That's just sort of a fun sort of thing. And in Annapolis, when they were counting the ballots in that close mayoral race, it was in the old Annapolis Rec Center that hadn't been used, and it was very cold. It was November, and we were all freezing cold, trying to stay warm, with all our jackets and blankets, and they weren't prepared to have all of these people sitting there. And some people, like residents, voters, came down to watch, and they were asking the board that was canvassing, what about my ballot? Did you count my ballot? And there was an issue of whether people had licked their ballot envelope or if they had taped it, and like what could be counted. And that was like kind of a wild mess that turned out okay in the end. It's a lot of fun, actually, covering local government.
Well, and you must be running around like crazy right now, right? In the midst of all of this, we have some really intriguing statewide races and local races. So you must be just, neck deep right now and trying to keep track of all these candidates and what they're doing and what they're saying, right? I mean, it's got to be incredibly, incredibly busy for you at this point.
Well, I'm focused on the gubernatorial primaries, and there are 10 Democrats on the ballot and 4 Republicans on the ballot. And keeping track of 14 people is more than a full-time job. Not all of them are really contenders, but there's like 2 Republicans who are the front runners. There's 3 Democrats kind of at the front, but then there's maybe 5 or so, a couple more, like maybe 5 total, who maybe could have a shot. So I think I spend all day calling and texting the campaigns to keep up on what they're doing, chasing them around. The other day I was with Republican candidate Kelly Schultz walking around in West Baltimore. The day before that, I was with Wes Moore's campaign, who was unveiling an endorsement up in Towson, and we just sort of chased them all the time. But we are in the home stretch, but we may or may not have apparent winners in either of these races or several other races on Tuesday night. So we're going to be holding our breath, I think, for a while.
Yeah, that has become a topic. We've I don't want to say we've beaten it to death, but I think we've been trying to give appropriate attention to our listeners so they're aware that we're going to have an awful lot of ballots that show up in envelopes that we can't start to process until Tuesday night. And instead of it being a tiny trickle like in the olden days, it's going to be maybe 500,000 votes where we have to do literally manual labor to unpack and process all those ballots. So yeah, Tuesday night might be disappointing, especially in some of our bigger jurisdictions, but those big statewide races, I don't know if 10 o'clock is going to be time for speeches. Right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And 500,000 votes is like definitely not an exaggeration. I just looked up the number. It was more than 489,000 mail-in ballots have already been sent out. So, it could be that. And let me just give another number for the listeners. The Democratic ballots, there were 365,000 almost have been sent out already. So 365,000. The total number of votes in the 2018 Democratic primary for governor was 585,000. So, and we could have lower turnout. So the portion of the electorate that is mailed ballots could be well north of 50%, 60%. The majority of people may be voting by mail, and those don't start getting counted until Thursday, the 21st.
Yes, it is not ideal. We've definitely been trying to keep people aware of what's going on and sort of set expectations so that people aren't banging on the doors of their local boards of election and blaming them, because this is certainly not their fault. They're dealing with a lot, and this on top of it is a lot. I do want, so Pam, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, nobody's showing up at the polling places and the numbers are down. I think a lot of that can probably be attributed to a lot of the people that normally would vote early for the primary are probably the same people now who are voting by mail. I think that's definitely has to come into play here. So when I see people saying, oh, well, the numbers are down and it's really slow, I wonder how much of that, I mean, in your opinion, that has to play into this, right? Like a lot of those people are probably the same folks now voting by mail who used to show up in person to vote early during a primary election.
I think that's a good theory. And I mean, we'll maybe know for sure after Tuesday when we see how many people early voted, how many people voted day of, and get those final numbers. But I think something that happened was in 2020, so many people voted by mail and were comfortable with it. And we had the advent of the drop boxes in particular that people, I voted by mail and used Dropbox, and I felt better doing that than when I voted by mail, putting it in the mailbox, right? Because now you can put it in the Dropbox, right. You can track it and see, you get notified, when they accept your ballot, and it gives people more confidence in the vote by mail system. So I think you're right. It very well could be people who are early voters before are shifting to vote by mail. I think that's quite possible. It's July 19th. We've never had July. Kids are in summer camp. People are going to the beach. Who knows how much people are engaged, whether turnout overall is suppressed or whether turnout is shifted to vote by mail. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There are a lot of factors in play here. And Michael mentioned it's hot outside. That must mean that the Mako Summer Conference is coming. It is August 17th through the 20th in Ocean City at the Roland Powell Convention Center. And Pam, the Baltimore Banner is going to play a role here. On Saturday, the 20th, we're going to have a statewide candidate forum. So we'll invite the top candidates. And by then, we should know who are going to be. Yeah, we better, right? The Republican and Democrat nominees. So for governor, comptroller, and Attorney General, will have those folks there. And Baltimore Banner and Goucher College's Malia Cromer will serve as the moderators there. So I don't know. I assume it will be you, Pam. I know you're going to be down there, but I know that the Banner has committed to providing someone to help moderate. So that's really exciting. I think that'll be a good show.
Yeah, well, we're always happy to, participate in democracy and help get information out to people. And, Mako conference is going to be the place to be this summer, because we'll finally be through this, this primary and know who the nominees are. I'm sure like everybody's going to be down there.
Yeah, I think it'll be a busy one. We're expecting it to be. And before we let you go, Pam, I also just, not only are you a great reporter for state and local politics here in Maryland, covering a lot of different beats, but you're also the go-to for anything gymnastics, particularly on Twitter. If there's ever, like during the Olympics, I was tuning into your Twitter feed for your analysis on what was going on and the technical stuff. Give us the backstory there of why you're so interested in gymnastics. And you are the resident gymnast journalist here in Maryland, I'd say.
There's a few of us in the media world around the country who are ex-gymnasts. Yeah, so I grew up doing gymnastics. I followed my older sister into the sport, and I trained actually in Anne Arundel County at the Docksiders gym in Millersville when I was a kid. And I competed, and I went on to the University of Maryland, and I walked on the gymnastics team my freshman year. Although I had no business being on the team, I was definitely not good enough, but they had a roster spot, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Anybody who can participate in college athletics, even if you're like me and you just ride the bench, it is an amazing experience. It's really wonderful. And I coached some through college, and I returned to the sport as an adult. And so I'm in an adult recreational gymnastics class. There's a number of gyms in Maryland that have it. We have from, absolute beginners, people who've never done a forward roll, to folks like me who used to compete and still have a few tricks up their sleeve. It's really fun sport. I love it.
Love it. I love the background. That's great.
Yeah. So if anybody ever has any questions about gymnastics, I'm really good at women's. I'm pretty good at men's. Rhythmic gymnastics, not so good at that. But they can hit me up on Twitter, ask me anytime. I love talking about the sport.
All right. And Pam, where can people find you on the various social media channels, and where can people follow the banner?
Yeah, well, the banner is online at thebaltimorebanner.com. And we have a lot of content free, including our voters guide is free. And we also have a great daily newsletter you can sign up for. So again, it's thebaltimorebanner.com. And you can find me on all the socials at Pwood Reporter. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Pwood Reporter.
Well, thank you so much.
This was
great. Yeah, great follow for sure. This was great. We really appreciate you taking the time. This has been on our list to get you on here as a guest. And good luck to you keeping up with everybody in the home stretch here.
Yeah, Michael, Kevin, thank you so much. This is fun. I'm excited to finally be on Conduit Street.
All right, we will leave it there for today. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can subscribe. That way, all these episodes will be sent directly to the device of your choice. You can also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and then, of course, the Conduit Street blog. But for Michael Sanderson and Pamela Wood, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off, and we will talk to you soon.